nothing about this story is simple. A leaked contract, a foreign country. The same names resurfacing again and again around powerful institutions, overseas charities, and unanswered questions. Because once you place the documents next to the timelines, and the timelines next to the people involved, a troubling pattern begins to emerge. Not proof, not conclusions, but connections that refuse to be ignored. Tonight, we're looking at what's being described as a newly leaked Romania contract hand, why it has reignited serious questions about Tyler, Bowyer, and Erika Kirk, questions that many say should have been asked years ago, and questions that, until now, have remained buried beneath silence, deflection, and coincidence. But before we go any further, if you value careful, evidence-based true crime analysis, like this video, share it, and subscribe for ongoing investigative coverage. And as we go through this, comment below with your thoughts. Do these connections concern you? Or do you believe they've been misunderstood? Also, let us know where you're watching from. Now, let's begin by explaining why this story matters far beyond headlines and social media discourse. This story matters because it isn't about online drama, personality conflicts, or political rivalries. It's about power, access, and accountability, especially when that power intersects with vulnerable populations and operates beyond public oversight. When individuals connected to influential organizations engage in overseas charity work, government partnerships, or foreign contracts, the expectation is transparency, clear records, clear explanations, and clear lines of responsibility. When those things are missing or when explanations change over time, that's when legitimate questions arise. What makes this situation especially concerning is not any single allegation, but the repetition, the same locations, the same institutions, the same small group of people appearing again and again across different timelines, different countries, and different controversies. In true crime analysis, repetition is never dismissed as coincidence without scrutiny. This also matters because the consequences of silence are real. When stories involving foreign contracts, orphanages, or international aid go unexplained, the people most affected are often the least able to speak for themselves. And history has shown, repeatedly, that lack of oversight creates space for abuse, whether financial, institutional, or human. To understand the significance of the Romania contract leak, we need to clearly identify the key figures involved, not through opinion or rumor, but through documented roles, public records, and verified timelines. First, Candace Owens, a public commentator and media personality who, in this case, is not positioned as a central actor in the events themselves, but as the individual bringing forward information that she claims raises serious questions. Her role here is that of a source amplifier, someone drawing attention to documents, connections, and timelines that had not previously been examined together in public view. Next, Tyler Bowyer, known publicly for his involvement in political organizing and operational leadership. Tyler held positions that placed him close to funding streams, institutional decision-making, and international engagement. According to public reporting, his work extended beyond domestic operations and included overseas activity at key moments in the timeline. That access, combined with later financial changes and travel records, is why his name becomes central to this investigation. Then there is Erika Kirk. Her public narrative centers around humanitarian work and international charity involvement, particularly overseas. Records and testimony place her in Romania during the same period when contracts, partnerships, and charitable operations were being established. The question raised by critics is not about stated intentions, but about what oversight existed, who facilitated these arrangements, and how closely her work intersected with others now under scrutiny. Finally, there are the institutions, charities, organizations, and foreign partners that connect these individuals. These entities matter because institutions create legitimacy. They provide cover, access, and credibility. When institutions operate across borders with limited transparency, the responsibility to account for their actions becomes even more critical. Romania is not a random detail in this story. It is the geographic point where multiple timelines converge and where humanitarian narratives, government partnerships, and foreign contracts begin to overlap. According to available records and reporting, Romania became a focal point during a period when international charities and aid-related organizations were actively forming agreements with local institutions. These arrangements were often framed as efforts to support vulnerable children, reform orphanage systems, or provide humanitarian assistance in coordination with government or military-linked entities. What raises concern is not the existence of charity work itself, but the structure of these operations. Contracts and partnerships tied to Romania appear to have been established with limited public documentation, minimal transparency, and little clarity about oversight mechanisms. When organizations operate across borders, accountability becomes fragmented, and that fragmentation can obscure responsibility. This is where the alleged Romania contract becomes significant. According to claims now circulating, this document suggests a formalized relationship that goes beyond casual charity involvement. If accurate, it indicates a level of coordination, authorization, and access that would require explanation, particularly regarding who approved it, who benefited from it, and how it was monitored. Critically, Romania also appears in the timeline of multiple individuals involved in this story, sometimes independently, sometimes overlapping. Travel records, employment histories, and public statements place key figures in the country within similar time frames. Each visit, taken alone, may seem unremarkable, but when viewed together, they form a cluster that invites closer examination. To evaluate what this Romania contract actually means, the most important tool we have is the timeline. Because timelines don't argue, they don't speculate. They simply show who was where and when. The earliest point of interest begins in the early 2010s. This is the period when Romania was actively engaging with foreign charities and international partners, particularly those claiming to work with orphaned or displaced children. It's also the same window during which key individuals in this story are documented traveling internationally and expanding their professional reach. Around this time, Erika Kirk is connected to humanitarian efforts overseas. Public narratives place her involvement in charity-oriented missions that align with Romania's outreach to foreign organizations. These efforts were presented as benevolent, but details about contractual terms, oversight, and long-term outcomes remain limited in public records. At roughly the same point in the timeline, Tyler Bowyer appears to be expanding his operational footprint. Records and reporting indicate international travel and engagement during a period when he was otherwise facing financial instability domestically. This contrast between personal financial strain and international involvement becomes relevant later in the story. As the years progress, both individuals move into more influential positions. Erika's proximity to institutional partners increases. Tyler's access to funding channels, donors, and organizational leadership expands. Importantly, These advancements occur after their Romania-related activity, not before. What makes the timeline notable is the overlap. The same country, the same general period, the same type of work. And yet, public explanations offered later often describe these paths as unrelated or coincidental. From an investigative standpoint, coincidence is not dismissed, but it is tested. By the mid to late 2010s, these earlier connections begin to matter more. Financial circumstances change. Professional roles elevate. And relationships that were once described as distant suddenly become central. What pushed this story back into public view was what's now being described as a leaked Romania contract, according to claims circulating online. This document allegedly outlines a formal agreement tied to activities in Romania, an agreement that appears to go beyond informal charity work or short-term humanitarian visits. The significance of this leak is not just the document itself, but what it implies. Contracts establish authority. They define responsibilities. And they create paper trails. If authentic, this contract would suggest that certain individuals were operating with a level of official access and coordination that has not been fully explained publicly. Candace Owens is the figure credited with bringing attention to this material. She has described it as evidence that challenges earlier narratives that framed involvement in Romania as limited, incidental, or purely charitable. According to her claims, the document raises questions about who facilitated these agreements, who signed off on them, and what obligations they created. It's important to be clear here. The existence of a leaked document does not, by itself, prove misconduct. Documents can be misinterpreted, incomplete, or taken out of context. That's why investigators don't stop at the leak. They compare it against timelines, roles, and subsequent behavior. And when this alleged contract is placed next to the established timeline, it appears to align uncomfortably well with periods of increased access, influence, and later financial stability. That alignment is what transforms this from speculation into a legitimate subject of scrutiny. When analyzing a story like this, the details are important, but the patterns are critical. Patterns reveal whether events are isolated or part of something larger, whether coincidences are just that or warning signs. In this case, a few patterns stand out. Repeated involvement with vulnerable populations. Both Tyler Bowyer and Erika Kirk have documented ties to orphanages, charitable projects, and overseas operations. Alone, one engagement could be explained as genuine humanitarian work. But multiple, overlapping involvements in different countries raise questions about oversight and intent. International operations with minimal transparency. The organizations in question operated across borders Romania, Ukraine, and possibly other countries. Documents and public records provide only partial visibility into contracts, partnerships, and decision-making authority. From an investigative standpoint, lack of transparency is never neutral. It requires examination. Overlaps in timing, location, and personnel, travel records, charity activities, and professional roles indicate that these individuals were present in the same countries at the same time, repeatedly over the course of several years. This convergence creates a network, not a one-off event. Financial anomalies coinciding with overseas activity. Reports indicate sudden improvements in financial situations for key figures following periods of international engagement. While this is not evidence of wrongdoing, it is a legitimate point for inquiry and is often a key focus in investigative true crime reporting. Patterns like these don't prove guilt, but in the world of true crime, patterns are how investigations begin. They guide the questions, the interviews, and the areas where documents must be examined more closely. And the most concerning part of this story is that these patterns aren't isolated to one location or one moment. They repeat across countries, across years, across organizations. Another layer that cannot be ignored is the intersection of financial changes and access to power. In true crime investigations, sudden shifts in wealth or influence, especially following overseas activity, often warrant closer scrutiny. According to public reports, Tyler Bowyer experienced periods of financial instability prior to his overseas engagements, followed by a rapid increase in resources and lifestyle upgrades. From foreclosure losses to a multi-million-dollar property purchase within a few years, these changes are notable. They raise questions about the sources of funding and whether the timing of these increases aligns with foreign contracts or charitable activity. Erika Kirk's roles also intersect with institutional influence. Her connections to charities, governments, and other organizational leaders provided access to networks that could extend far beyond domestic operations. In investigative terms, access combined with oversight gaps is a red flag. Not proof of wrongdoing, but it is where investigators focus their attention. Equally important is the organizational hierarchy. Both individuals were positioned in ways that allowed them to interact with decision-makers, donors, and governmental partners. The concentration of influence within a small circle of people overlapping with vulnerable populations requires transparency that appears incomplete in public records. In any responsible investigation, it's crucial to consider alternative explanations. Patterns and anomalies alone don't prove wrongdoing, they only highlight areas that require scrutiny. For instance, supporters of Tyler Bowyer and Erika Kirk emphasized that their overseas work was charitable in nature, focused on orphanages, and conducted under the auspices of recognized organizations. Travel and contracts, from this perspective, were part of legitimate humanitarian missions, not personal gain. Likewise, financial shifts can have multiple explanations. Investments, property purchases, or inheritance could account for sudden liquidity. And documents circulating online may be incomplete or taken out of context. Public statements and media interviews have also portrayed both individuals as committed to transparency. They maintain that all activities were legal, approved, and above board. Yet, even with these defenses, unanswered questions remain. How exactly were contracts structured? Who signed off on international operations? Why do timelines appear to overlap in ways that contradict some public statements? And crucially, why is there limited public documentation to fully clarify these connections? Even with the leaked contract, timelines, and public statements. Key questions remain unanswered questions that any responsible investigation must address. Contract clarity. What exactly did the Romania contract authorize? Who signed it and who was accountable for oversight? Overlapping roles. Why were Tyler Bowyer and Erika Kirk present in Romania at the same time, repeatedly, in connection with the same organizations? Financial questions. How do the timelines of overseas activity align with reported changes in wealth and resources? Were all financial transactions properly documented and legally accounted for? Institutional transparency. What internal audits, reports, or documentation exist from the charities, government agencies, or partner institutions involved? Patterns across countries. How do activities in Romania compare to alleged overseas engagements elsewhere, such as Ukraine? Is there a repeatable pattern that demands scrutiny? Impact on vulnerable populations. How are orphanages and children directly affected by these operations? Is there evidence of accountability for the outcomes of these engagements? These are not rhetorical questions, they are the foundation of true investigative work. The story is not about accusation. It is about identifying gaps, patterns, and areas where public records and transparency are lacking. Every serious investigator knows that unanswered questions are not weaknesses, they are the doorway to discovery. And in this case, the door remains wide open. Before we conclude, it's important to be clear. Nothing in this story is a declaration of guilt. This is an ongoing situation, and many details remain unverified or incomplete. What we've done here is reconstruct timelines, examine publicly available documents, highlight patterns, and raise legitimate questions. True crime reporting relies on transparency, facts, and cautious analysis, not speculation or sensationalism. The leaked Romania contract, overlapping travel records, financial shifts, and repeated involvement with overseas operations all form a pattern that demands further investigation and accountability. The questions are real, and they remain unanswered. For viewers, the takeaway is simple: stay informed, ask questions, and demand clarity from institutions and individuals entrusted with power, especially when vulnerable populations are involved. And as always, if you found this investigation compelling, make sure to like this video, share it, and subscribe for more evidence-driven coverage. Comment below with your thoughts, theories, or questions, and don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. Because in true crime, the story doesn't end when a document leaks or a timeline is revealed. It continues until every question is answered.